Welcome to the Darkstream. I have no idea if this is actually on, so if anyone is actually tuning in, let me know. We have no viewers at the moment, so that would appear to not be working terribly well. Oh, we have one viewer. Fantastic. It is on. Well, this is my second attempt at this sort of thing, and I'm using Streamlabs OBS right now, and I have to admit it's not working. I don't know what I'm doing at all. I don't understand why the picture is up the way that it is, but I'm just going to have to mess around with this and figure out what's going on. For some reason, the screen is mostly taken up by news of people who subscribed. So, hey, I have said time and time again that high IQ is absolutely no substitute for experience. And so, I don't really know what the... Okay, so you can disable the preview screen if you want. Oh, I see, I can resize a little bit. That's vaguely useful. Anyhow, what I wanted to talk about tonight, and what I will change the name of this stream to once I have some idea about how to modify these things on YouTube and so forth after the fact, is that something happened today with regards to Patreon. Actually happened 2 days ago, but I just found out about it last night. And you may or may not be aware, but Patreon deplatformed Faith Goldy, the Christian conservative commentator from Canada. And what I thought was really fascinating about that is the fact that it demonstrates the way in which our old punching bag, Jordan Peterson, is a free speech fake. And what I mean by that is that here we have somebody who is largely famous on the basis of being a big defender of free speech, of standing up to the SJWs and all that sort of thing. And yet, if we look at the facts, if we look at what's actually happened, what we see, what we know, is the fact that Jordan Peterson behaved in very much the same way towards Faith Goldy that Patreon did. Now, Patreon canned her by claiming that she was guilty of hate speech. They didn't give any examples. They didn't offer any evidence. They didn't offer any proof. And they just canned her. Now, you may or may not be aware, but Jordan Peterson also deplatformed Faith Goldy. He did so at an event, and what was worse about it was the reason that he gave for deplatforming her from a panel that she was supposed to be on with him. And what I found particularly egregious about it was the way that Peterson attempted to blame Goldy for someone who was interviewing her. Now, I've been interviewed by all kinds of people that I don't agree with. I've been interviewed multiple times. I've been interviewed more than once by the guy from the New York Times that Trump made fun of during the campaign. I've been interviewed by all kinds of people. Some of them I agree with, most of them I don't. Some of them I like, some of them I don't. But the whole point of free speech and discourse is that you engage with people with whom you disagree. So that's why when I've had numerous people on Brainstorm. I've had Richard Spencer on it. I've had Dr. Christopher Hallpike on it. Now, I assure you that those two gentlemen have absolutely nothing whatsoever in common. But I was interested in knowing what they had to say. I've interviewed Jonah Goldberg. I've even interviewed David Frum and Dinesh D'Souza. Does that mean I agree with them? Does that mean I'm responsible for what they say, what they believe? No, of course not. And yet, Peterson not only banned Faith Goldy because she allowed herself to be interviewed by someone that Peterson didn't approve of. But what was worse is that he actually tried to claim that I listened to it very carefully. My son and I, we listened to it very carefully. And yet, he claimed that she didn't push back. She didn't practice good journalism. She didn't show proper journalistic responsibility when she's the subject of an interview. Okay, that's absolutely backwards. As the subject of an interview, you have no responsibility whatsoever to ask questions, to push back. I mean, come on. There's trying to hold the subject of an interview responsible for who the interviewing party is, and then lambasting them, criticizing them, because they didn't ask their interviewer questions. Peterson said, one question would have been good, 3 would have been better. That makes no sense whatsoever. When I was being interviewed by Alex Jones the other day, I don't think I asked him a single question. Why not? Because I was on his show. It's his job to ask the questions. It's my job to answer them. And so what makes this whole situation particularly ridiculous is that here we've got Jordan Peterson being held up as a big defender of free speech, someone standing strongly against the SJWs, and yet he is behaving in exactly the same way that the SJWs at Patreon, whom we criticize, are behaving. Not only that, but a number of people who were on Patreon, right-wingers who were on Patreon, guys like John Della Rose. He shut down his Patreon account. He moved over to Freestarter. There's other people who are shutting down their Patreon accounts and moving to Indiegogo. I'm sure there are a number of other similar services. A number of my readers have come out and said, I've canceled my Patreon donations. And so, and what they did, which is what I suggested, is they canceled their donation, and then they explained to the person they support, the person that they supported, that they are not doing it because of Patreon's treatment of Faith Goldy, and that they will be happy to support those people again when they get off of Patreon. And that's something that I would encourage all of you to do. The same way that parents cannot permit their kids to go to a filthy, perverted movie like Show Dogs. Show Dogs is the movie that was created to customize children to the idea of being felt up. It was essentially trying to teach children how to submit to being felt up by pedophiles. And so there's a big outcry. A bunch of theater chains actually pulled the movie from the theaters. The production company took out a scene or two that revolved around that. Now, of course, it's still a terrible movie and a terrible company. They only did this because they got caught. I don't know if there's any truth to the rumor that Disney is going to set up a whole show dog section somewhere at Disney World where little kids can show up and get felt up by Goofy and Pluto. But you know that they're going to end up with a show dogs on ice at some point. But the thing is that in the same way that you wouldn't take your kid to an evil movie like that, you should not be supporting even good people on Patreon. Because by doing so, you are fraternizing with the enemy, you're supporting the enemy, you are helping those people who are attempting to destroy you, to destroy your culture, and destroy your nation. And we've seen with the reaction to show dogs, we've seen with the way the NFL, after 2 years, finally gave in and reacted to the fact that their ratings on television have dropped by 20%. The NFL finally took action because people withdrew their support and withheld their money. And that's what you should be doing with these companies that demonstrate that they are fully SJW converged. There is no fixing the left. When you read people like Ben Shapiro, when you read people like Jonah Goldberg, the whole sort of National Review conservative movement right, you'll notice that they are always lecturing the left. They are always either threatening or trying to fix the left. I've mentioned this before. There are all of these columns that get written over and over again. As I said before, I've been reading this column for 30 years. And it's the same column, and it always says, they've gone too far this time, and they're not going to like it if things keep going this way. Well, you know what? After 30 years, everybody has figured out that those are empty threats. Everybody has figured out that the conservatives aren't going to do a damn thing. They're going to whine about it, they're going to fuss about it, and 5 years later, they're going to attack everybody who holds the position that they previously held. So they're not going to fix anything. And by trying to claim that you're going to somehow influence the left or somehow fix the situation by getting involved with them and by working with them and by supporting them, it's not going to work. And so, that's why I've been, saying this repeatedly ever since I wrote SJW's Always Lie. We need to build our own institutions. We need to support our own. We need to stand by people who get targeted and isolated. And what we're learning now is that we have to set up our own economy. The approach that is being taken right now is that the right is being systematically demonetized. What we're seeing is a very early version of what in the Bible is referred to as the mark of the beast. Now, we don't need to get into the religious aspects of it, but what we do see is people are increasingly unable to engage in simple, straightforward economic activity. Faith Goldie cannot even use Patreon to simply accept financial support from her fans. Now, today it's Patreon, but the banks are going to get into it too. You're going to see the banks cutting people off. You're going to see the credit card companies cutting people off. How long do you think it's going to take before they get around to you? I'm banned from Twitter. I am not permitted to monetize this channel on YouTube. And there are many people who are similarly banned from various services simply because the companies don't approve of them. And so, yeah, I mean, this is Operation Choke Point, but it's aimed much more broadly than just at the dangerous companies, the companies selling, firearms and whatever else it is. But this is not just coming for the canaries in the coal mine. This is coming for everyone. And so, the sooner that you understand this, and the sooner that you realize that you're not immune from this, the sooner that we're going to be able to build the alternative institutions, because a lot of these things are already underway. Infogalactic is up and running and functioning. We don't have anywhere near the number of editors that we need. We don't have anywhere near the number of editors that we would like to see, but we do have good support from the burn unit. We're able to keep the lights on, keep the servers going. It's there for you. Use it. There's Freestarter. There's Indiegogo is better than Patreon. I don't think that it's necessarily much better, but it certainly isn't as converged as Patreon is. And here's the thing. If Jordan Peterson is a genuine free speech advocate, then what is he doing on Patreon? Why is he supporting an SJW converged organization that is actively and aggressively opposed to free speech? Has anyone asked him that? The thing that you have to understand is that in the same way that Ben Shapiro is a fake American conservative, Jordan Peterson is a fake free speech advocate. Now, I'm not saying that free speech is the most vital thing in the world. I'm not a free speech advocate myself. But if you're going to sell yourself as a free speech advocate, if you're going to claim to be a free speech champion, if you're going to run around the country, run around the world, lecturing people on how they have to be individuals and they have to speak their own truth, then there's absolutely no way that you should be working with a company like Patreon. There's absolutely no way that you should be supporting any business that is as ruthlessly prone to speech policing as Patreon. So anyhow, thanks for bearing with me as I continue to try to figure out how these streaming systems work. I don't even want to tell you how many times it took me to just get this much working. But thanks for tuning in. And I won't say we'll see you tomorrow, because let's face it, I'm not sure I'll be able to turn this on tomorrow. But we'll figure it out. And in the meantime, have a good evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.